pork. I smoked up a pork butt yesterday, and my method, what I do, and then this is just what I do, I take it to about 185 and I start testing for tenderness because my grill, for some reason, just does that. At about 197, I pulled it because the probes were going in like peanut butter. Flavorful as hell, but not tender. When I opened it up, it was whatever. So it's sometimes it's the luck of the draw, I think.
Yeah, if you use a bamboo skewer, I taught a lot of students, and the bamboo skewer method, it has been very consistent. You know, I've done about 250 classes, trained 3,000 over students past 12 years. I always tell people avoid using this thing.
Oh,
so if you want to cook better, yeah, put that and you all watch. Lock these two things in the drawer before you start, and cook with a bamboo skewer. Today, I'm not doing that because today I'm cooking steak. So in steaks, you need this tool. But when you're cooking anything else, low and slow, put this tool away. You don't need it. All you need is a bamboo skewer. Because I trained a lot of students and they were not winning contests consistently. As soon as they took my class, they started winning, and they attributed to the fact that I taught them a very simple trick. One skewer in cold peanut butter, one skewer in your meat. You keep poking the two, and when they feel the same, your pork butt, your brisket is perfect.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I didn't use the thermometer for the temperature. I have probes that I leave in while it's cooking, so I can monitor it. But when I use the thermometer as the skewer.
Yeah. Again, right? The if you look at the tip of the thermopan, right?
Ah.
It's different. So let me show you what I mean here. You gotta make sure that you get to a point where this is so thin here, and this is thicker. So once you practice, unless you have two thermopans, right? Like I said, the calibration I'm teaching you is to use this in peanut butter, not this in peanut butter. So the probe tips is not the same thickness. So if you use this tool and you have one in your peanut butter and one in your meat, you know, I guarantee you that it works 100%. Because I have trained so many students to do that. And
when are you resuming training?
I actually wanted to do training, but that thing, the pesky thing called the COVID virus, right, keeps interrupting my classes. I have a lot of people backed up in the classes because, you know, like I said, right, I was going to try to teach Zoom classes, and maybe what I'll do is, you know, this will be kind of like one of the modules I teach in my class. I teach a steak class also. So you essentially, we cover a lot of topics. Like we cook 20 items in class. So this will be like just one of the items of the 20 I cook in class. But I put a lot of detail in the class, and I have not quite figured out how to do the Zoom class so that you can pay attention for 6 hours. My class runs from about 7:45 to about 1 o'clock. And we cover a lot of things. Because we talk, cook, and eat, the class runs really fast. A lot of people tell me, wow, Harry, I have no idea. It's now 2 o'clock. I just showed up in your backyard and it's now 2 o'clock and I learned so many different things. And the way the class is set up is I teach you something every 10 minutes. So in 1 hour, you learn 6 things from me. So in 6 hours, you learn 36 modules, and then you leave with 36 modules of information in your head. These 36 modules are like Lego blocks. These Lego blocks allow you to switch things around so that whatever I taught you, like here, when you're at home, you can take that module and apply it to somewhere else. So that's why people tell me the class is so powerful, because it breaks information down into pieces that you can apply in your everyday cooking. You can apply in your restaurant cooking, you can apply in your catering cooking, and you can apply in your competition cooking. So a lot of the things I teach, right, are kind of universally useful. So that's why, you know, I'm trying to figure a way to replicate that on a Zoom session.
Harry, I have I was making a chimichurri sauce yesterday, and it came out too bitter, and I couldn't figure out how to get the bitterness out.
The bitterness came from the herbs?
Right. Yeah, so I used parsley and I used chives. I also put garlic and what else? And onions as well. Scallops.
Okay. Yeah, I think the issue probably has to do with the garlic. You use raw garlic, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so when you make a chimichurri, for those of you who are not familiar what chimichurri is essentially uh, oil and vinegar with a bunch of herbs. So you need to balance the ingredients out. So if you're telling me it's kind of bitter, that means that you probably added too much onion and too much garlic. If you want to make a good chimichurri, my recommendation is that you can follow a recipe, but it's better to just do it by tasting. So what you do is you take vinegar to start, right? You add a little bit of oil, maybe like, depending on how you like it. If you like a very tangy chimichurri, you add more vinegar versus oil. You blend up the oil and vinegar first, and then you taste it. When your oil and vinegar is at the right amount of tanginess, then you add your herbs and add it carefully. So in this case, right, I suspect that if you tell me it's bitter, chimichurri, if it's bitter, it's probably just your garlic is too raw, or you added too much garlic or too much onion. So what I would do is, if you like garlic, I would recommend you either you microwave the garlic first, or then you roast the garlic first, so that the harshness or the bitterness of the garlic is muted. And then you add that to your mix, you mix it up, then you add your herbs, and then you add your salt, and you add your pepper, and then you blend it and you taste it. That way you will avoid any kind of harshness, because the chimichurri is kind of like a very herbal, fragranted kind of vinaigrette dressing. And the chimichurri is actually fantastic on steaks. You know, if you cook a steak, you put chimichurri on it, it actually is very, very good on all kinds of seafood. So chimichurri is a technique that's popular in South America, but that same technique is used around the world. A lot of people, you know, you have salsa. Salsa does exactly the same purpose. When you have a good salsa, when I go and have churrascaria, right? The secret to be able to eat a lot of churrascaria is to make sure you have a big bowl of that salsa, so that the meat doesn't kind of choke your taste buds. So you use the salsa to kind of add as the palate cleanser. And when you eat a lot of the salsa with the churrascaria, you can get your money's worth, because I think they're charging about like $80 now. If you go to Fogo de Chao, you know, these places are charging you about $80 for a meal.
Harry, as far as binders go, like schmears, like people were using mustard. I use mustard on a brisket. Is there any other creative things you've had that worked out well that you've used for schmear?
Yeah, I mean, some of them I'm even too embarrassed to say, but you can put a lot of stuff on as a schmear. There's obviously Worcestershire. You saw me use the beef concentrate. You can use obviously mustard. You can use mayo. You can use water. You can use apple juice. You can use what do you call hot sauce. You can use beer. You can use cola. I mean, the sky's the limit, right? The idea about the schmear is just to create a surface that the rub will stick. And if you inject your brisket, the meat is already wet. You really don't need a schmear. A lot of times people use mustard because mustard is very inexpensive. It comes in a squeeze bottle, so it's easy to apply. You don't have to kind of futz with a cap. So the schmear is, in my opinion, not the most important thing in your barbecue toolkit. But if you have a piece of dry meat, it's a lot easier to apply the product if you put some kind of a schmear on it. But mustard is fine. You know me, right? I'm really very cost efficient and very process efficient. I'm cheap and lazy, so that's my go-to method.
I actually find you very active because you actually work in the district and you do the barbecue thing. So
yeah, I mean, like I said, right? Remember Harry taught you, right? Life is brief. Live it with intensity. You know, the sand in the hourglass is only so much, right? So when the sand runs out, you know, that's it, you know. So I always tell people, if you spend more of your life working on the things that matter, to some people, success is measured by the number of zeros behind their bank accounts. To some people, it's measured by the number of businesses they own. I believe that in life, right, we're all going to the same place. Doesn't matter, you know, how many zeros you have behind your bank account, how many houses and businesses you own, you're going to the same place. So when you get to that point where you sunset your life, I believe that there are only three things that are important at that point. That is basically the love you receive, and the love you gave, the memories in your brain before your brain stops, and then your family, and then you know, and the relationship that you left behind.
Harry, I have a question. I noticed that you didn't use phosphate TR in this recipe. So in the steak competitions, do you use that often, or do you salt brine?
Okay, so first of all, do you know what is the purpose of the phosphates?
Sorry, yes, I think you asked that. What is the purpose? Well, I think it's for tenderizing. Is that what it's for?
Okay, so let me
Yeah.
let me break down the science for you. Okay,
Right.
remember, I'm one of those weird people, right? I drive my instructor and teachers crazy because always Harry says, why? If I do something, I need to know why. Because if there's no purpose, I won't do it because I am too lazy. So the purpose of the phosphate is, let me just recap, right? A phosphate produces what is known as a plumping action. So you have ionic repulsion when you inject phosphates into your meat. So the microfibrils of protein will repulse each other and pull apart, causing more room for moisture to enter, more flavor to enter. I'm cooking a ribeye steak, prime grade aged for 20 days in the refrigerator. The meat is already super soft and tender. So if I added phosphates to it, it's not going to cause any major effect to it, right? Because it's already been aged. Now, if this was a piece of raw steak and I wanted to have better flavor or better moisturization, then the phosphate would be something I could use at this point in time. But if I use the phosphate, I think it's kind of a little bit overkill, right? The phosphates themselves are found in many foods. If you eat a McNugget, you eat any processed food, they have phosphates in there because phosphates cause a plumping action because they cause ionic repulsion within the microfibrils of protein. So that's the purpose of the phosphate. The phosphates don't tenderize the meat. To tenderize the meat, you need a tenderizer, such as a bromine or a kind of a papain that is a tenderizer that breaks down the strands of protein. So the phosphate is not a tenderizer. The phosphate is a moisturizing agent to keep your meat plump.
Okay, good to know.
Harry, I've got a question. I've got a Weber Smokey Mountain 22-inch, and in your tribute to Tootsie, you did a couple of the meats without the water pan in there. And I was curious about that and how that changes the food and what kind of changes you have to make, what kind of adjustments you have to make to cook without the water pan in there.
Have you ever cooked with a drum smoker?
I have not.
Okay, so there's basically two kinds of barbecue that you can do. One is called indirect, and then one is called direct. So like, you know, you saw the hasty bake, right? Back there,
Right.
if you were looking in when I put the lobster in, did you notice that the coals was right below the fire? That would make it a direct heat pit. So Tootsie, right, cooks her barbecue using direct heat. That means that she puts the embers right underneath the meat's right on top. So that's called a direct heat. So to answer your question on the Weber Smokey Mountain, the Weber Smokey Mountain you can cook direct, you can cook indirect. The secret for cooking direct heat is that you got to make sure that the meat is far enough from the fire so that it doesn't get burnt. So you're shooting for the temperature at the grate of approximately about 300 degrees. If you go too high, your meat will burn. That's why for people who do drum cooking, they have to be very mindful how hot the fire is, because if you don't moderate the fire in a drum, the direct heat method will scorch your meat. The mechanism of indirect cooking involves a concept called pyrolysis. And when you have indirect, you are doing pyrolysis of the resin in the wood. But when you do direct cooking, you not only have the pyrolysis of the resin in the wood, you also have the pyrolysis of animal fat. So as the animal fat drips on the coal, it sizzles, and that provides additional flavor. That's why there's a 3-hour argument and Jerry Springer fistfight between the people who like direct cooking with the sizzling effect and the smoke effect versus the people who don't like that sizzling effect. They only want smoke.
Right.
I believe both methods are valid. It's just a matter of your style.
Harry, all that smoke coming off your grill right now, is that actual smoke pellets or is that the grease igniting?
Who knows? I could have a grease fire. You want to see?
Yeah.
Who was brave enough to see? All right. If I don't have eyebrows left, it's your fault. Okay. Okay. I know you guys want to see this, so look.
Oh.
Okay. Hot. All right. So, did I prove my point? This is what scares people.
Isn't that basically the wood being burnt off? The wood pellets being burned right now?
No,
you
it's
shouldn't
just
have that much.
basically running hot. And if you have any residual grease from a previous cook, which I do,
Oh.
I wanted to show you what happens, right? So people get scared when they see that.
Harry, how long do those grill grates take to actually come to temperature? Because I noticed that I use ones that are cast iron, and I know I got to keep them on the fire for quite a while to get them up to temperature to sear.
Yeah, I mean, you saw how fast the smoke fire works, right?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not talking about the smoke fire. I'm talking about the actual grill grates themselves to be able to create the searing effect.
Yeah, it depends on your pit, whether you have a direct fire.
Okay.
Right?
Where do you get that beef concentrate?
Oh, sorry. Beef concentrate. Where do I get it?
Yeah, where can we get it?
I got it from like a restaurant supply store.
Okay.
So I mean, you have a place called Restaurant Depot where you live?
It also be called Jetro.
Yeah, Jetro. Yeah, that's where I found it. You can find it any like Smart and Final restaurant supply store.
Okay.
They have it on Amazon also.
Yeah, I think you go to the restaurant supply store, you can find it. I mean, a bottle goes a long way, and it seems like it has a long shelf life. And I use it for brisket. I also use it for steaks. And then when I'm cooking at home, and sometimes when I'm making like a dish, and I need a little bit of a amp in flavor, I just put 1 teaspoon of that beef concentrate. Is absolutely fantastic. You can use it when you make any kind of beef stew. You make any kind of a stir fry. That beef concentrate. The reason that it's so tasty is because it does have flavor enhancers. So it's got 3 flavor enhancers that are very common. You guys know one is called MSG. The other 2 are called inosine and guanylate. So they are basically flavor enhancers that are found in almost all kinds of foods. So once you study a little bit of food science, you understand the chemistry of food, how to get the different types of chemicals that make food taste good. You can replicate those chemicals naturally by using kombu, using bonito flakes, using shiitake mushrooms, or you can buy the white powder, which is how the commercial food industry does it to create flavors.
On the reverse sear, if you're doing like 2-inch thick pork chops, what point would you bring them on the smoke before you sear them?
Okay, are you cooking the pork chop? Which style you're cooking until it's like 145-degree type pinkish, or you're cooking it all the way it's dead?
No, I want it pinkish when I cook.
Okay. Yeah, I would take it probably to maybe like 125-ish, and then do a sear, and then try to finish around 148, 145. And that way your pork chop is tender and soft. For those of you who are not aware, when you cook a pork chop, if you don't brine your pork chop, the pork chop will end up being like rubber. And that's why a lot of people who cook pork chops, they're very surprised why it's so like a hockey puck. That's because they don't understand the physiology of there's not a lot of fat in it. So if you cook a chop, right, it's from the loin, which is the ribeye of the pig. So like I just cook a ribeye of a cow. The ribeye of a cow is very tender. The ribeye of a hog is also tender if you cook it properly. Typically, I like to brine my pork chops before I cook it. And I try to cook it around 145, 150 degrees so that, the pinkishness is kind of dissipated. If I don't cook it that way, then I'll cook it all the way to the other extreme. I'll cook it all the way to around 190 to 200 degrees. So it's more like a butt. But cooking it that way requires a little bit of skill. So I don't recommend that way if you're doing it for the first time. Just do it the normal way. Just cook it about 150 degrees, you'll be fine. And if there's a little bit of pink in the pork, don't worry. you are not going to die of some kind of disease, because trichinosis is not something that happens in America at all.
Well, yeah, Harry, that's something I commented to you months ago, was
Yeah.
that I'm 70 years old. In the 50s, my grandmother used to overcook all pork, but pork was different then. It was a red meat. Pork really isn't a red meat unless you buy that, Maganista or the Heritage brands, which are more like the old style of us are old enough to remember that kind of pork. And I never had good pork until my future wife taught me how to cook pork, where pinking, I would say medium. Medium.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's not cooked, but it's wonderful that way.
And like pork can be eaten like a steak, and a lot of people, still have the vestige of the diseases that plague pigs. The only time you get diseases from pigs are people who hunt wild boar, and we have about maybe a dozen cases a year of pork-related parasitic diseases. They almost all come from the hunting community that killed the boar, and then they didn't know how to process it, and then they ate some of the meat and they got sick. But getting sick from eating commercially cooked, commercially raised hogs, I would say it's probably zero probability of that happening. So
somebody asked Harry when your video dropped, at what temperature do you have the steak when you put your wet and dry ingredients on it?
What's temperature? It was from the refrigerator.
Yeah, you let it come to room temp.
No, I don't. Okay, so let me explain to you a couple of things here. Number one, the general rule of thumb is when you are cooking meats, right? If you want to have smoke, you want to start your meat at around the refrigerator temperature, which is between, say, 32 to 36 degrees. The reason for that is because you want a long temperature gradient. You want the gradient to be long so that you start the meat at a cold temperature, so that by the time it hits 110, it takes about 40 minutes. So depending on the level of smoke that you have in your pit, the meat will absorb all the smoke. That's what you want. Now, if you want to grill a steak really, really fast, then it really doesn't matter. You can let the steak come up to temp, because grilling it is just flipping it back and forth. There's no smoke action involved. It's called a direct heat cook. When you cook anything indirect, like you cook briskets, you cook butt, you cook ribs, you cook chicken, that indirect method, you always want to start from the refrigerator temperature. If you run a restaurant, you run a catering business, you are not allowed to let meat come up to temp. So when the health department shows up, you get cited if you have meat lying around the counter, because the meat is in the danger zone. The danger zone, for those of you who want to remember, very easy, 40-140. Harry taught you the 40-140 rule. Meat has to be below 40 degrees or cooked and above 140. Anytime you have meat in that danger zone, it's against health regulations.
Harry, this is Gary. I have a question on a brisket. I aged it 30 days, wet aged it, and I cooked it at a competition, and the point was very good, very tender, very flavorful. The flat was tender, but it had absolutely no moisture left in it.
Okay, what grade was the brisket?
It was a prime grade brisket.
Yeah, so these are the things that, like I say, you really have to have enough experience aging meat and cooking it, because like I said, I'm not a kind of proponent of like aging works for every condition. In a contest, it's hard to overcome the variability of the brisket, because remember, a brisket comes from every animal, and every animal is different. The combination of calpain and calpastane, I would suspect, varies by the carcass. And if you get one that just beautifully ages, that's great. But I don't have enough experience aging beef to be able to tell you which is going to be the secret process on how to pick a good piece of brisket that will age well. I know in aging houses, right, they're aging probably like $500,000 worth of meat at a time. So they have the process down to a science. They have food technologies that monitor all those variables to age the meat perfectly, because if they screw it up, they screwed up $500,000 worth of meat.
Perfect.
Harry, speaking of food safety, with all the grills you have going, because I have multiple grills, how often do you clean grates? Some grates don't get used for a week or so. Is the temperature that you cook at good enough to, I know it's not just the bacteria or whatever left over, it's the residual, but how often do you clean your grates?
It's best to clean after the cook and clean before the cook. That is my recommendation. For example, like here, right, this Weber, I heated it to 600 degrees. We did a cook. So before I shut down, I'll just clean it before I put it away. I live in California, so I'm very fortunate. I don't have snow and rain and sleet to deal with. So if I leave stuff out here, so long as the raccoons don't get into the pit, I'll be okay. And mold is not existent in California. So, but in certain states that I know, if it's really wet and rainy, you open up your pit, you got a bunch of penicillin growing in your pit, that's probably not a good idea. So in that case, you have to clean your pit completely. I live in a dry climate, so I don't have that problem. But if you do in a wet environment, just make sure your pits are clean, because you know, cleanliness is safety.
And the grate cleaning is scraping down and wiping down, or full scrubbing down with soap and water. You know, that's a lot of, you know.
Yeah, okay. So the first thing I want to mention is that I never clean I never wash down my pits. So some of my pits are 10 years old. They never been taken to like a drive-through wash and then a pressure wash. All my pits are cleaned by scraping with a wire brush, and then I just scrape the grates, or I wash the grates in the sink. A lot of times what you do, you put the grate into a trash bag, you spray the oven cleaner on the grate, and it just washes off. So I clean my grates that way. A lot of times I just scrape. For those of you who joined me earlier on this episode, right, you saw how I just scraped my smoke fire just to clean the grates. Because I just cooked on it recently, so it's not like super gunky that is not being used for months. So you can pressure wash your pits, but I don't recommend it because it takes a long time to build a patina on the inside of the pit. And you really want that kind of aroma to not be washed off. And I have pits that are 10 years old that I still cook on. All I do is I give a thorough cleaning. It's very important to scrape the creosote off. Those are the little flaky thingies. So especially on the dome, on the roof of your pit, you have these little flakes that will fall on your food, which is not recommended. So for that, you have to use your brush and kind of brush off all these flakes in your pit, along the walls and along the hood, and then just, you know, wash your grates in the sink, or just scrape your grates off. So I don't recommend you pressure wash your pits.
Harry, not even the inside of the hood?
The inside of the hood, I scrape it because it's not possible to wash the inside of the hood, right? Unless you have a drum smoker, you can take the cover and wash in the sink. But for most of my pits, right, like you have a Weber smoke fire, there's no way to wash the kind of the roof area of the pit. You just have to scrape it down. All right, we're down to 2 hours now. So sorry it ran a lot longer, but I think you guys hopefully got a lot out of it. I'll take a couple of last questions, and then we'll let you guys go on your busy day. I'm a competitor, so if you turn in that steak with salt and pepper in a contest with 100 teams from Texas, it's gonna be hard to win first place. So the lobster is nice and seasoned now, but I'm not gonna put it in because the steaks will take a while. So I'm running the pit right now. We have for those of you not aware, this is the smoke fire. It does have a notorious reputation on the internet. I showed you. For those of you who follow me, I took a lot of heat for cooking on it. I like it because I have a lot of pits, and like I said, right? I mean, every pit has pros and cons. There is no perfect pit. So whether you use the smoke fire, you use a Jimboey, you use a kettle, you use a hasty bake. I was up all night cooking on this puppy here. You guys know? Have you heard of this thing called a hasty bake?
No, the first time I saw one.
Okay, so a hasty bake is the oldest pit in America. It is completely stainless steel, and it's still hot, right? Let me see here. It's still at 150 degrees. It is a direct heat pit. So it's kind of a drum, like a UDS. And this pit is built in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And my buddy, Rich Alexander, who owns the company now, he sent me one, and I'm doing a kind of a review on it. And what is nice is that it is a very, very solidly built traditional pit, a favorite among a lot of pitmasters.
I get confused with the reverse sear because I'm subscribed to 48 channels. And the reverse sear, some people take it off at 105, 110, 115, 120. And these are like high-rated people, and they use the grill grates to do the final sear, and then you don't know, what is it, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes? It's confusing.
Yeah, of course it's confusing because you are following too many channels. If you go to a taekwondo instructor, and then the next day you go to a jiu-jitsu instructor, the next day you go to a kickboxing instructor, next day you go to a martial artist, how are you gonna know which way is the right way?
Good point, but I'm bored and it's COVID's around, you know. So
yeah, and you know, I'm sorry to tell you this, right? But by the way, right, if you're watching 50 channels, right, that means you're not cooking. That means that in my book, you're known as a keyboard cook. You know what a keyboard cook is, right? A keyboard cook is a person who cooks on a keyboard. They don't really go out and cook. They don't sit like me out there in smoke and fire, stay up all night long and give TLC to a brisket. A keyboard cook is a person who spends hours and hours and hours. Like people, right, who watch Tiger Woods videos. They watch 10,000 hours of Tiger Woods videos and they say that, well, you know, how come I keep swinging my golf club wrong? Well, you know, you can't swing your golf club correctly if you don't swing it 10,000 times. If you watch it, somebody else swing it. If you watch LeBron shoot 3 throws 10,000 times, ain't gonna help your free throw. So my recommendation to you out there, and this is not just meant for anybody, but all my Patreons and all the people watching my video, do not listen to me. Go out and cook. Do not be a keyboard cook. Always, right? Do not believe Harry. Learn to know yourself, because when you know, then you can do it your way. So whether it's 108 degrees, 115 degrees, 125 degrees, it doesn't really matter, because you have developed the experience and the skill to know on how to become a meat whisperer. That's really the purpose of my channel and my desire to pass on my knowledge to you.